Good morning. It is Monday, September 21st, 2020. You can now relax and be informed. Here is your daily bite of news. A federal judge has issued an injunction against President Trump's executive order banning the Chinese social media app Wechat from operating in the United States after midnight on Sunday, presenting at least a temporary setback in the president's efforts to block an app that he has labeled a national security threat. The motion for a preliminary injunction was filed August 27th by the U.S. Wechat Users Alliance, a nonprofit group whose trustees included several prominent Chinese-American lawyers. The group says it has no connection to Tencent Holdings or any of its affiliates. In her decision, Judge Laurel Beeler of the United States District Court for the Northern District of California said that she had chosen to grant the motion because the plaintiffs had raised serious questions about whether the order would harm First Amendment rights. She also said that it placed significant hardship on the plaintiffs, who had argued that it would shut down the primary means of communication for the Chinese community. Thomas R. Burke, a lawyer representing the plaintiffs, said they were grateful for the decision. Never before has a president sought to ban an entire social media platform with such discriminatory animus and haste, he said. Given the judge's ruling on Sunday, neither of the apps will be banned as of midnight Sunday. The U.S. government could now appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court to seek to overturn the stay. A Canadian national suspected of having mailed an envelope containing ricin poison to the White House addressed to President Trump was arrested on Sunday while trying to enter the United States border into Buffalo from Canada, nearly a year after she had been deported from the United States for engaging in criminal activity. Currently in the custody of border agents, she is set to be charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington. Her name was not released. 56 former prime ministers, presidents, foreign and defense ministers from 20 NATO countries, plus Japan and South Korea, released an open letter Sunday imploring current leaders to join the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the pact negotiated in 2017 that is now just 6 ramifications shy of the 50 needed to take effect. The letter, released on the eve of the United Nations 75th anniversary commemoration at the Annual General Assembly, asserted that the risks of nuclear weapons use has escalated in recent years. Under the treaty, all nuclear weapons use, threat of use, testing, development, production, possession, transfer, and stationing in a different country would be prohibited. For nuclear-armed countries that join, the treaty outlines a process for destroying stockpiles and enforcing the promise to remain free of nuclear weapons. All responsible leaders must act now to ensure that the horrors of 1945 are never repeated, the letter urged, referring to the atomic bombs dropped on Japan by the United States. Sooner or later, our luck will run out, unless we act. The Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty provides the foundation for a more secure world, free from this ultimate menace. The letter was released against the backdrop of heightened nuclear threats. The world's 9 nuclear-armed powers, Britain, China, France, India, Israel, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, and the United States, boycotted these negotiations and said they would never sign the treaty. American officials called its premise dangerously flawed, arguing that the treaty could even elevate the risk of a nuclear conflict. Signers of the letter are all from countries that have declined to join the treaty, arguing that the nuclear forces of the United States are essential for their own security. 5 of those countries, Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey, are believed to house American nuclear weapons on their territory and would therefore be required to remove them if they join the treaty. Proponents of the treaty hope that widespread acceptance of the treaty will raise public pressure and the shaming effect on the holdouts to change their position in the future. European leaders have warned the U.S. that its claim to have the authority to reimpose sweeping UN-mandated sanctions on Iran has no effect in law, setting up a major legal clash that could lead to Washington imposing sanctions on its European allies. In a joint statement on Sunday, France, Germany, and the UK, or the E3, said any attempt by the U.S. to impose its own sanctions on countries not complying with the reimposed UN ones would also legally void. There is also a risk that the U.S. will claim it has a new mandate to interdict Iranian shipping, a move that could lead to a naval clash in the Gulf. The E3 have already sent a letter to the Security Council challenging the U.S.'s right to reimpose sanctions unilaterally in the name of the UN. Washington's threats have led to a predictably fierce response from Iran. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned the U.S. that Iran was capable of setting fire to all U.S. bases in the Gulf at once, according to an interview on state TV. But in practice, Iran has acted relatively cautiously and may want to avoid a military clash with Washington before the U.S. presidential elections. Iran claims it is not in breach since it has continued to give the UN weapons inspectors access to its sites, even though it acknowledges its stockpiles of enriched uranium are above the levels set out in the original agreement. Cuba, a police state with a strong public healthcare system, was able to quickly control the coronavirus outbreak. The health system did not collapse, and no children or medical professionals died of the disease. With 11.2 million people, Cuba had just over 5,000 cases and 115 deaths by this Friday, one of the lowest mortality rates in the world. But its economy, already hurting from crippling U.S. sanctions and mismanagement, was particularly vulnerable to economic devastation that followed. Tourist travel to Cuba plummeted, and the island lost an important source of hard currency, plunging it into one of the worst food shortages in nearly 25 years. The Trump administration has worked hard to strengthen the decades-old trade embargo, going after Cuba's sources of currency. It also imposed sanctions on tanker companies that delivered petroleum to Cuba from Venezuela and cut back on the commercial flights from the United States to the island. Last month, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced an end to charter flights to Cuba as well. The pandemic and the recession that followed pushed the government to announce that after years of promises, it would make good on a series of economic reforms intended to stimulate the private sector. The Communist Party said in 2016 that it would legalize small and medium-sized private businesses, but no mechanism was ever set up to do so. Thus, business owners are still unable to get financing, sign contracts as a legal entity, or import goods. Now that is expected to change, and more lines of work are expected to be legalized, although details have not been announced. Many Cubans are now hoping that economic reforms will stimulate the private sector and allow independent business operators to kickstart the economy. Protesters turned out in major cities worldwide this weekend to demonstrate frustrations over returning coronavirus lockdown measures, even as cases spike and the global death toll approaches 1 million. More than 1,000 people gathered in central London as Mayor Sadiq Khan and Prime Minister Boris Johnson consider whether to resume lockdown measures. Other places in Europe saw similar protests, with hundreds gathering in Dusseldorf and Madrid. The German protests saw some demonstrators calling to free Julian Assange. In Spain, protests did attempt to uphold social distancing and safety measures, even as they called for Madrid Region President Isabel Díaz Ayuso to step down. Australian police arrested around 100 protesters who gathered in Melbourne. In Belarus, Sunday's protest had about 2,000 demonstrators, mostly women, marching through the streets of Minsk. Hundreds were detained and ushered into filled police vans, including Nina Bahinskaya, a 73-year-old great-grandmother who has become an icon of the protest movement. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer joined forces in Brooklyn on Sunday night to call for a national mobilization against confirming a replacement for the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg before Inauguration Day. Speaking at James Madison High School, which Ginsburg attended, both Democrats described the potential fallout of replacing Ginsburg with a conservative chosen by President Donald Trump. We need to make sure that we mobilize on an unprecedented scale, Ocasio-Cortez said. Our reproductive rights are on the line, our labor rights are on the line, our right to health care is on the line. Both cited Ginsburg's last wish that the next president pick her successor. We're here because the American people want those rights preserved. We do not want to turn the clock back, and we only need 2 more senators to say that they will abide by RBG's wish, Schumer said. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is locking down key votes from Republican senators in his bid to fill the Supreme Court vacancy. McConnell can afford to lose only 3 Republicans. Senators Mitch Romney, Republican of Utah, and Cory Gardner, Republican of Colorado, are believed to be possible swing votes, but neither have announced a position yet. All Democrats are expected to back Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in arguing that Ginsburg's seat should not be filled until 2021. But Senate Democrats have limited tools at their disposal as the minority party. Pelosi shut down the possibility of Democrats leveraging government funding to slow down the Senate confirmation process, but did maintain that Democrats have arrows in their quiver to stop the Senate from advancing a nominee. She declined, however, to discuss their options. When the Senate returns to Washington on Monday, McConnell's leadership team is expected to meet and discuss the GOP strategy, and on Tuesday, all Senate Republicans will gather for the first time. Trump is expected to announce a nominee later this week and has said he will choose a woman. That ends our news for today. To read more on any of these topics, see our description for links to the sources. Subscribe to receive a daily news update. Thank you for listening. Be relaxed, be informed, be connected.